How do you assess the current trajectory of those capacity inside Gaza to receive injuries or patients? Do you think it's in a good trend? And how, with all those restrictions, with all those lack of medical equipment, drugs, is there a potential to increase the capacity in a very short time? Thank you.
Well, first and foremost, yes, I want to be positive here. Gaza, but also West Bank, I mean, that's maybe different. People do not realize. I got these questions also on the CMCC that people were surprised when I informed them that so there's still tertiary facilities and primary healthcare facilities, as I said, which are currently what we call partly functional, minimum functional. But the level of and the capacity of health workers in Gaza and West Bank, I would say is similar what you find in a lot of high income or middle income, high income countries. So the capacity always has been, the technical capacity has been very high. And although a lot of the health workers, and this is when I left yesterday from Al-Ahli Hospital in a discussion with an orthopedic surgeon, which always has done wonders, and he demonstrated a little bit of his disappointment. He said, I can do now already so much more. And I still, for example, have one or two drains, and every time I have to do an operations, you know, we have to go through the whole sterilization process, etc. So he was disappointed that he still didn't have some of these very simple key supplies and equipment. And he also admitted that he said during the war there was of course a lot of adrenaline, and we were just going on. A lot of health workers are also mentally, I think, very much affected, and they're exhausted, they're tired. That is definitely something to be addressed. The good news is the technical capacity of health staff in Gaza is actually rather high at all levels. And if they get supported by the right supplies and equipment, if we can get going on proper early recovery and rehabilitation, and then the larger reconstruction, and for example, the early recovery you can do with prefabs and a lot of that kind of stuff, and focus our resources on a primary healthcare network, strong primary healthcare network, with a group of general hospitals and maybe with three level 3 hospitals in the north, center, and south. I think changes can come very rapidly, and that's supported by what's already now in place, emergency medical teams from outside and from inside. That would be great. I also want to plea, there's many Palestinian medical specialists, doctors, nurses, lab technicians in East Jerusalem and the West Bank who want to assist, who want to work and assist in Gaza. So this is another way you would hope that the routes, that the entry will be opened also for them to help and assist in Gaza. And then I think a lot can happen in a relatively short period. Over to you.
I see no further questions, and I don't think that there are any questions online. So without further ado, I think I will relieve you so that you can have the rest of your evening. Thanks again for everything over the years, and take care of yourself, Dr. Pieperkorn. Have a great time.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thanks. I'll now start with a Friday briefing, and since it's Friday, there's a lot of notes, so bear with me. First off, we have a statement attributable to the spokesperson for the Secretary General on Sudan. The Secretary General is deeply alarmed by reports that at least 30 civilians were killed, with many others injured, in a drone strike on the town of Katila in South Darfur State on the 8th of December. The attack reportedly took place roughly 150 kilometers southwest of the state capital, Nyala. It comes as the toll of escalating violence on civilians across the Darfur and Kordofan regions, particularly through increasing drone strikes, continues to grow rapidly. Further civilian casualties were reported in another strike on the town of Kutum in North Darfur State on the same date. The Secretary General condemns all attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure. He demands that all parties abide by their obligations under international law, including international humanitarian law and international human rights law, across all areas of active conflict in Sudan. With the 1,000-day mark of this devastating conflict approaching, the Secretary General reiterates his call on all states with influence over the parties to take immediate action and use their leverage to compel an immediate halt to the fighting and stop the arms flow that are fueling the conflict. He also calls on the parties to agree on an immediate cessation of hostilities and to resume talks to reach a lasting ceasefire and a comprehensive, inclusive, and Sudanese-owned political process. The United Nations stands ready to support genuine steps to end the fighting in Sudan and chart a path towards a durable peace. Today marks the 10th anniversary of the Paris Agreement. In a social media post, the Secretary General said a decade ago, the world found the courage to adopt the Paris Agreement, a pillar of hope for humanity. Today, he added, we must find courage once again. The Secretary General called for 2026 to kickstart a new decade of implementation. The climate crisis is one of the defining challenges of our time, he said. Together we can and we must build a livable future for all. And today marks the 25th anniversary of the Algiers Agreement, a landmark peace treaty that formally ended the border conflict between Eritrea and Ethiopia and established a crucial framework for peaceful relations between the two nations. In a statement we issued this morning, the Secretary General reiterated the steadfast support of the United Nations for the Algiers Agreement. At a time of renewed tensions, the Secretary General urges Eritrea and Ethiopia to recommit to the vision of lasting peace and the respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity embodied in the Algiers Agreement, and strengthen efforts to build good neighborly relations. He calls upon both countries to continue working with regional and international partners to advance development cooperation for the benefit of all. The Secretary General concluded his meetings in Saudi Arabia today and will travel to Iraq tomorrow, where he is expected to meet officials in Baghdad, including President Abdul Latif Jamal Rashid, Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani, and Foreign Minister Fuad Mohammed Hussein. The Secretary General will underscore Iraq's progress and acknowledge the resilience of Iraq's citizens, who rebuilt their country after decades of conflict, terrorism, and hardship. As UNAMI's mandate comes to an end this month, the Secretary General will pay tribute to the women and men of UNAMI, who walked side by side with the Iraqi people for 22 years, and he will honor the victims of the 2003 terrorist attack on the UN headquarters at the Canal Hotel, which killed 22 of our colleagues and injured more than 100 others. He will reaffirm the UN's commitment to supporting Iraq's institutions, development, and long-term stability. The Secretary General will then return to Saudi Arabia, where on Sunday he will participate in the 11th UN Alliance of Civilizations Global Forum. We will share with you all his speeches and remarks in Baghdad and Riyadh. Yesterday, we briefed you on the recent airstrikes on a hospital in Rakhine State and the grave and deteriorating situation facing civilians in Myanmar. The Secretary General reiterates his call for an immediate end to the violence inflicted on the population since the 2021 military takeover. The continued use of force threatens not only the people of Myanmar, but also the wider stability of the region, driving displacement, weakening the rule of law, and fueling cross-border trafficking and other illicit activities. He again calls on the military to halt its operations causing harm to civilians and to meet its obligations under international humanitarian law and human rights law, including the obligation to protect civilians. You will recall that the Secretary General has also been clear on the political situation, including the planned elections later this month. He has repeatedly expressed concern regarding the military's stated intention to hold elections amid intensifying violence and human rights violations, and without conditions that permit the people of Myanmar to freely and peacefully exercise their political rights. The Secretary General continues to urge all stakeholders to engage in an inclusive political process that reflects the will of the people and to support the efforts of his special envoy, Julie Bishop, in the search of a Myanmar-led resolution to the crisis. Turning to Gaza, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tells us that heavy rain continued overnight across the Strip, flooding more tents and causing damaged buildings to collapse in Jabalia and Gaza City. Several casualties reported, including among children. Our humanitarian partners warned that bad weather conditions and flooding are increasing the risk of disease outbreaks, including waterborne illnesses, as drainage systems overflow and water sources become contaminated. They stressed that to enable urgently needed work to collect and safely dispose of waste, the immediate and sustained entry into Gaza of spare parts and access to essential machinery must be facilitated. As temperatures drop, families are struggling to keep their children warm at night as they lack access to gas and electricity. They're also exhausted as they continue to seek out safer shelter on higher ground. Our partners are distributing winter clothing, tarpaulins, and tents to affected families. However, they estimate that some 1.3 million people still need urgent shelter assistance across Gaza. For instance, they note that since the ceasefire just over 2 months ago, fewer than 50,000 tents for about 270,000 people have entered Gaza. This includes both UN-coordinated and bilateral aid. As we've mentioned, thousands of pallets of shelter materials have been rejected by the Israeli authorities, and many NGOs have been blocked from bringing in relief. Our partners leading on shelter estimate that more than 140,000 people were affected by earlier rains that flooded more than 200 displacement sites. They continue to help families access critical services and improve drainage, as hundreds of thousands of displaced Palestinians remain at heightened risk of flooding. Families staying along the coast were displaced and are staying with relatives. Many other families sought temporary accommodation in already crowded emergency shelters. As tents and some classrooms were inundated, teams are removing water from flooded yards, clearing manholes, and repairing damaged tents inside school compounds. The UN Relief and Works Agency said it has shelter supplies for up to 1.3 million people outside Gaza. But the agency has been barred from bringing that aid into Gaza, which is hindering humanitarian efforts. OCHA stresses once again that restrictions on the entry of aid must be lifted, including the ban on UNRWA and the denial of NGO operations. Turning to the West Bank, OCHA reports that since the beginning of the year, more than 1,000 people have been displaced in Area C, which constitutes some 60% of the West Bank, and where, just like in East Jerusalem, the Israeli authorities retain near exclusive control, including over law enforcement, planning, and construction. Most of the people displaced had their homes demolished by Israeli authorities for lacking Israeli-issued building permits, which are nearly impossible for Palestinians to obtain. This level of displacement is the second highest annual record since 2009. OCHA also continues to document high levels of Israeli settler attacks against Palestinians, with devastating humanitarian impacts. Since the start of the year and as of today, an average of 5 such attacks has been recorded each day. We call for the protection of Palestinians across the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, including by halting punitive and other unlawful demolitions and preventing attacks by settlers. A quick update from our peacekeepers in southern Lebanon. Peacekeepers from the UN Interim Force in Lebanon reported that yesterday, Israel Defense Forces personnel pointed a green laser towards them in Sector East. A similar incident of laser pointing by the Israel Defense Forces took place the day before in Sector West. Any interference in the mission's operations or intimidation of the peacekeepers must end immediately. Meanwhile, Israeli Defense Forces' military presence and activities in UNIFIL's area of operations continue. Yesterday, peacekeepers reported several air violations and machine gun fire from south of the Blue Line at Kfar Shuba and Markaba in Sector East. UNIFIL peacekeepers have continued to find unauthorized weapons caches and unexploded ordnance. On Wednesday, peacekeepers found rockets, mortar shells, fuses, and a tunnel in Sector West. Separately, a UNIFIL and Lebanese Armed Forces combined patrol discovered inactive rocket launcher tubes, active rockets, and a 20 meters deep tunnel in Sector West. As per standard practice, these discoveries were referred to the Lebanese Armed Forces. This morning, the head of our Peace Operations Department, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, briefed council members on the situation in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. He told council members that the recent developments pose a serious risk of progressive fragmentation of the DRC. The territorial expansion of the AFC M23, the establishment of parallel administrations, and the weakening of the state's presence in certain areas are fueling a dynamic that directly threatens the unity, sovereignty, and territorial integrity of the country. At the same time, Mr. Lacroix added, the conflict is becoming increasingly regionalized. The direct or indirect involvement of armed forces and groups from neighboring countries, as well as the cross-border movements of displaced populations and combatants, are significantly increasing the risk of regional conflagration. This threatens not only the stability of eastern DRC, but also the entire Great Lakes region. Mr. Lacroix said that the growing gap between political commitments and their effective implementation on the ground undermines the credibility of the peace process, weakens trust between the parties, and fuels the sense of abandonment felt by the civilian population. Without concrete and immediate measures to enforce the agreements reached, the dynamics of conflict risk closing the door to dialogue. His full remarks have been shared with you. And in a statement issued this morning, Wang Sha, the special envoy for the Great Lakes region of Africa, also reiterated our readiness to support international and regional diplomatic efforts towards a comprehensive political solution. He said he has begun a regional tour to hold in-depth consultations on ways and means to de-escalate tensions, adding that in the past 48 hours, he's been in touch with several foreign ministers from the region. Meanwhile, in the Central African Republic, disarmament and demobilization operations for combatants continue in the context of the peace process. This week, in Sikekede and in Samwanja, both of the country's northeast, the national disarmament body launched new disarmament and demobilization operations, with our peacekeeping mission in the Central African Republic, MONUSCA, providing logistical, technical, and security support. These operations directly benefit civilians. Communities feel reassured every weapon from circulation is one less risk for communities. Since the 10th of July, more than 1,000 combatants have been disarmed and demobilized. Turning to Ukraine, our colleagues from the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs report that as temperatures drop to zero, intense hostilities in frontline areas and attacks in other regions continue to cause widespread destruction to civilian infrastructure, including critical energy facilities. Overnight attacks on energy infrastructure in the Odessa region damaged 2 power substations, leaving part of Odessa city and surrounding areas without electricity and affecting at least 90,000 families. Hospitals, schools, and other municipal facilities are now running on backup generators. The city's water supply and heating were also disrupted. According to the latest report from the UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine, between October and November, at least 8 waves of large-scale missile and drone attacks severely affected the country's energy system. The strikes caused emergency power outages and daily electricity cuts in multiple regions, with scheduled power cuts lasting up to 18 hours each day. Some areas experienced disruptions to water services and heating that lasted for many hours or even days. Meanwhile, in Kherson City, humanitarian organizations on the ground warned that following last week's attacks on the central heating power plant, the situation is critical, with about 40% of the population cut off from heating. Local authorities have issued an urgent appeal for 120,000 heaters to help residents cope with the cold. OCHA is working with the UN Refugee Agency and other partners to coordinate emergency support. And I want to flag that the organizations endorsing the Declaration of Principles for International Election Observation have concluded their 20th anniversary implementation meeting today in Geneva. Since its adoption, the number of organizations endorsing the document has grown from 21 to 54, with endorsing organizations in every region of the world. During today's event, the endorsing organizations reaffirmed their commitment to the Declaration's principles, including impartiality, professionalism, cooperation with national authorities, and the protection of human rights. They also highlighted new tools and methodologies to strengthen international observation missions and support genuine democratic processes worldwide. More information has been shared with you. Today is the International Day of Neutrality. Neutrality supports dialogue, preventive diplomacy, and the peaceful settlement of disputes, all core to the UN's work. Neutral states play a vital role in strengthening international peace and friendly relations among nations. Today is also International Universal Health Coverage Day, underscoring the need for strong, resilient health systems and universal access to care. On Sunday, we mark the International Day Against Colonialism in all its forms and manifestations. Colonialism in its various forms continues to exist, undermine the principles of the UN Charter, and hinder development. Ending colonialism remains a core UN priority. And on Monday, my guest will be Denise Brown, the UN Resident and Humanitarian Coordinator in Sudan, and she will be joining us virtually from Kadugli to brief on the humanitarian situation in Sudan. That's it from me. Any questions? Yes.
Thanks, Farhan. As you know, the Security Council received a briefing on Congo, and MONUSCO's mandate is up for renewal. I'm wondering, given the recent peace talks followed by violence, followed by the limitations of the peacekeepers there due to funding cuts, what the Secretary General's position is on MONUSCO's mandate going forward and how the current situation there informs what is needed.
Well, the Secretary General has regularly reported to the Security Council on MONUSCO's mandate, and he's pointed to how the situation on the ground shows the clear need for the UN mission's continued activities. We certainly hope that the Security Council will continue to support MONUSCO. Certainly, the sort of fighting we've seen in South Kivu, which, as you all know, is a place where the UN mission is no longer even present, shows how dangerous it is for Congolese civilians when there's no UN presence to ensure their protection. And certainly we trust that the Security Council will take seriously today's briefing from Mr. Lacroix and will continue to support the work that the UN mission is doing. Yes, Pan.
Thank you, Farhan. You know, this year marks the International Year of Trust, Peace and Trust, and a high-level forum was held in Turkmenistan, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So does the SG has any message for the forum?
I think we certainly are just supportive of all efforts to uphold the cause of peace, and meetings among member states to that end are helpful.
Follow-up, Chinese President Xi sent a congratulatory letter to the forum in which the president emphasized the importance of mutual trust, mutual understanding, and mutual respect, and voices China's readiness to work with other countries to uphold world peace and security. So does the SG have any comments on the letter? Thank you.
Nothing beyond our support across the board for efforts among nations to reinforce mutual trust with each other. Muna has a question online.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Haq. We didn't get a chance to ask Dr. Peppercorn some questions during the previous briefing, so I'm following up with you, if that's okay. We'd really appreciate any updated figures on the number of amputations among children in Gaza and current access to rehabilitation, prosthetics, or orthopedic care and reconstructive procedures, both physical and psychological support. And based on these findings, what do you see as the most urgent interventions right now for people affected by amputations and the solutions that are being prioritized to respond to the impact of the recent floods that you just mentioned?
Well, as Mr. Peppercorn just said in his briefing, one of the things is for people who need advanced medical care to get it, including to have medical evacuation. So people who need to have specialized care for amputations or for prosthetics should be able to receive that. And certainly the other thing that's needed is that different equipment, including prosthetic limbs, need to be available inside Gaza. And so the sort of restrictions that we've faced, including those on potential dual-use items, need to be lifted for things that amputees desperately need. Regarding the numbers, we've provided those sporadically, but you can also look at those on the website of the World Health Organization. Deji?
Thank you.
Today, the GA adopted a resolution calling for Israel to cooperate with UN agencies as well as third states in the topic of Palestine. The Israeli ambassador Danun today said that they're not going to cooperate with UNRWA. This resolution wouldn't change what their position. So first, I guess, what is the response from the Secretary General on the adoption of this very long name resolution? I'm not going to read out the name.
I appreciate that.
And thank you. And secondly, what's his response to the Israeli ambassador?
Certainly, the Secretary General is heartened by the tremendous amount of support that the member states, including through the General Assembly, have shown for the work of UNRWA. And regarding cooperation with UNRWA, of course, it's critical that all states, including Israel, cooperate and work with UNRWA, as I said at the start of this briefing. And as you're aware, the International Court of Justice has also called for that in their recent ruling.
Second question. This happened during our briefing. U.S. President Trump posted something on Truth Social, said he had a good conversation this morning with the Prime Minister of Thailand as well as Prime Minister of Cambodia. Quote, they have agreed to cease all shooting effect this evening and go back to the original peace accord made with me and them with the help of the Prime Minister of Malaysia. Any response to the latest development?
We'll have to see, of course, if Thailand and Cambodia cease the current spate of conflict that we've seen in the last few days. Obviously, if that happens, that would be a tremendously welcome development.
Should the UN show gratitude to President Trump?
We've expressed our gratitude for the efforts to bring Thailand and Cambodia back towards good neighborly relations. And certainly we'll see whether this latest initiative works. Certainly it would be a very welcome step forward. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Institutions has broken down quite badly, other civil society organisations. So part of our role that's been very important is to build bridges between media and other civil society organisations so they're at least coming together in respectful debate rather than media being a bit isolated from the rest of civil society. And in my experience, that's one of the things that we can do to unlock really good solutions journalism.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, Mark.
A couple of last words. A solutions approach is good business for journalism. Journalism has a business model, traditional business model, that is in crisis. A lot of times when you all are complaining about what we're doing or what we're not doing, you're not bearing in mind that our newsroom staffs have been hollowed out because basically people aren't paying for news anymore, and because Google and Facebook stole a lot of our property, to be blunt. And one of the ways that we as journalists can respond to that is by focusing in on a lot of what we've been talking about today. So solutions journalism, the 89% project on climate, those are great stories journalistically, but they're also really smart commercially. It might be the only thing that can save our bacon, because you talk about building trust. That's how you get people to read your stuff, to watch your content. And this is why we think the 89% project is such a winning proposition, not just journalistically, but commercially. Because when you can say that there's 80 to 89% of the audience who wants climate action, that is not a sliver of your audience. That is not some marginal side. That is your audience. And if you are not speaking to your audience, guess what? They don't speak to you. If you don't show them in your coverage, they don't feel like that coverage is for them. But if you put their faces and their names and their quotes and their beliefs, not uncritically, but put them in your coverage, guess what? They're going to read your coverage. They're going to watch your news. And eventually, they might even start to pay for it, although, as my colleague from Nigeria says, the advertisers will come once they see that the coverage is there. And by the way, that's why The Guardian, which is our lead media partner, that's why The Guardian, almost alone among news organizations today, is profitable, because they have huge 88 million readers who feel like The Guardian speaks for them. And so even though you don't have to pay a dime to read The Guardian, they have huge numbers of people who voluntarily send money in. And as a result, then the advertisers want in and the philanthropists want in. It's a three-legged stool. So that's the way we go forward, I think, leaning into solutions journalism approach, not uncritically, of course, at all. But there's a lot of ways that we can turn this around, but it requires us as journalists, as has been said by everybody, to break down this feeling like we're not part of civil society. We are part of civil society. And if we lean into that rather than lean away, I think civil society will realize, oh, we do need a thriving news business. So again, anyone who wants to get involved, it's free. Come join us at Covering Climate Now. Just email us at editors@coveringclimatenow.org.
Repeat. That always works too. Thank you. Catherine, do you want just a final word? And
Absolutely.
then I'm going to conclude with David.
I'll be very quick. We're talking about solutions journalism and the SDGs. And the SDGs framework may be more or less relevant in your lives depending on if you're actively working on these issues or not. But just to broaden this out, if you care about making progress on our shared global challenges, climate, or any other global challenge, you should care about solutions journalism. I believe this deeply, because when people don't see that progress is possible, they tune out. And if people tune out, we're not going to make progress on these issues. But when people see that there is a way forward and feel that sense of hope and agency, they tune in, they take action. So again, broadening this out. And I would hope we all care about making progress on these global challenges. Certainly if you're here in person or tuning in, you care. Then you should also care about solutions journalism, whether you're a journalist or not.
When people see progress is possible, they tune in. I know, just last thing, because I know the Solutions Journalism Network is actually trying to demonstrate the business case, and you're showing examples of newsrooms who've actually increased their readership or viewership as a result of incorporating solutions journalism.
Yeah, there's research, lots of independent research that looks at trust, alternative sources of revenues, engagement, and impact, that looks at the different ways that solutions journalism contributes to that. And I would add for a fifth impact, like I've been a journalist, for more than 30 years now. I do solutions journalism because it makes my life meaningful. When I think about like the stories that I would sort of put on my tombstone after I'm gone, there are a couple of stories that I've written. One in particular about a Head Start program that had demonstrated how to be really helpful to children who had trauma, 4-year-old kids who were unable to learn, unable to make friends because of their trauma. They had developed a trauma-informed approach that was producing success. I reported on it in the New York Times. Ended up speaking to the woman who ran this program 4 years later, and she told me that 200 sites across the United States had replicated that program, including it had been incorporated in the New York City public schools approach to trauma because of the article. And when I think about going to sleep at night, like the feeling of like, wow, I may have helped a lot of kids with that story. That's really, as a journalist, that's the most important thing to me when I feel about what gives my life and my work purpose. And I think that's really available to everyone who's a journalist.
Well, that is a beautiful way to end this really enriching session on solutions journalism. Thank you, David, for sharing that. And I'm sure all of your journalism and all of your efforts are having tremendous impact, some seen, some unseen. Thank you for joining us. And this brings to the end our SDG Media Zone during the 80th UN General Assembly session. We have had in this SDG building, SDG Media building on the plaza at the United Nations headquarters, 5 days of incredibly insightful and engaging panels, conversations, stories, and certainly people. So I would like to thank all the participants for coming with their ideas, with their solutions, and for pushing the boundaries and working in everything that they do for the betterment of our world. I would especially like to thank our media partners from all over the world who are helping to amplify these conversations and truly make the SDGs a global call to action. We can have amazing conversations in here, but if nobody hears them or sees them, then that doesn't help us very much. So thank you so much to our media partners. And finally, it took a huge team, my team, to pull all of this together, but also the Public Foundation is absolutely essential, instrumental. We couldn't do it without you. Thank you so much for this incredible collaboration and for helping us bring this SDG Media Zone to life. Thanks.
Child trafficking is rising at an alarming rate, demanding immediate action. A child is sold, exploited, and lost to a system that thrives on silence. And the numbers? Despite ongoing efforts, they are worse than ever. According to the latest global report on trafficking in persons, children now make up 38% of all detected victims worldwide. That's a significant increase from just a few years ago, especially among girls. And the real number, it's likely much higher. Many cases go unreported, and countless child victims remain invisible. Why is this happening? Because children's vulnerabilities are growing. More children are being displaced, separated from their families, and left without protection. Right now, 47.2 million children are displaced due to conflict and violence. Another 3.1 million have been forced to flee because of natural disasters. And when protective systems break down, traffickers step in. Trafficking in children is a low-risk, high-profit crime. It's growing, it's organized, and it's evolving. Traffickers make billions of dollars every year. In 2024, the International Labour Organization, ILO, estimated that forced labor generates $236 billion annually, a 37% increase from just a decade ago. At the same time, traffickers are harder to catch. They use online platforms, encrypted transactions, and cryptocurrency to stay hidden. There's also a growing demand for child exploitation, both online and offline. An estimated 1.7 million children are in situations of forced sexual exploitation. Others are trafficked for domestic work, mining, agriculture, and street vending, hidden in supply chains around the world. Criminal groups are now targeting children for forced criminality, recruiting them into drug trafficking and other crimes. And while traffickers operate freely, many child victims end up punished instead of protected. So, what's being done? Governments, UN agencies, and law enforcement groups are working to stop trafficking networks. Organizations are trying to protect children on the move, strengthen laws, and prosecute traffickers. But it's not enough. Too many traffickers still go free. Too many child victims never receive support. If we don't act now, these numbers will only keep rising. But there is a way forward. To end child trafficking, we must act on 3 critical areas, among others. Protect children and reduce their vulnerabilities. We must tackle the growing demand and the misuse of digital technologies, cutting off exploitation at its source. And we must build a justice system that is fair and child-friendly. We need to hold perpetrators accountable and end impunity for this crime to deter traffickers. ICAT Call to Action provides evidence-based solutions on how to prevent and end child trafficking. Child survivors' experiences and suggestions shall inform solutions and responses. Every child deserves safety, justice, and a future free from exploitation. It starts with us. Share this video, talk about it, and help stop child trafficking before it's too late.
Il y a énormément de marches à gauche à droite, le soulèvement de la population, beaucoup de casse. Mais l'esprit professionnel des Okapiens, les techniciens d'Okapi, multimédia, broadcasting, on est là.
Nakangi micro.
Il faudrait que l'élite congolaise, l'intelligentsia congolaise puisse apporter sa contribution à la recherche des solutions.
Ce n'est pas la première crise. Ça fait 23 ans que Radio Okapi existe et Radio Okapi a survécu à toutes les crises en respectant la déontologie, l'éthique journalistique.
Le chef de l'État congolais Félix Tshisekedi s'est adressé hier à la nation.
La radio a pris toutes les dispositions pour que les auditeurs ne soient pas privés de l'information, la vraie information certifiée.
Les infos sont passées au peigne fin parce que dans une période de crise comme celle-ci, un mot de trop ou un mot de moins, une virgule déplacée, ça peut embraser le pays. Et donc, nous travaillons sur tous ces aspects-là et je voudrais surtout relever le travail en équipe. Un très grand travail d'équipe est fait. Personne ne travaille en électron libre et c'est ça, je crois, qui fait notre force.
Wanakia kusemea mambo ya Bukavu, Goma, mambo ambayo yanapitikana, wako wanakuta niko nawapokea kisi nastahiliwa kuwapokea. Ndio hivyo, tuko pamoja.
À la fois, nous sommes entre les appels dans une ville qui n'est pas connectée à Internet. On est obligé de fouiner ici et là pour trouver des sources, mais que tout cela soit équilibré. Et avec aussi cette pression gouvernementale, donc nous nous rassurons que tout ce que nous diffusons comme information répond aux questions essentielles, mais également une information qui ne doit pas faire du mal aux membres de la communauté et qui est là pour prôner l'unité et le développement de la région.
On se retrouve demain pour un autre numéro de découverte, surtout portez-vous bien et n'oubliez pas, dans quelques secondes...
Nous continuerons à vous servir 24 heures sur 24 parce que c'est le travail qu'on a choisi.
World Expos are organized by a body called the Bureau International des Expos, which is based in Paris. They have been taking place since 1851. You see different national pavilions, and these